Jung's Analytical Psychology, Part 4, Predispositions, Personality Psychology, Dr. Michael Botwin, Department of Psychology, California State University, Fresno. Jung believed that we were predisposed to do many things. Now, if Jung was around today, he'd say we were hardwired, it was genetic, things like that. Might be a psychological mechanism and evolutionary psych parlance. But we are preset to do some certain things. Now, let's get rid of some misconceptions right up front. Jung didn't believe that we inherited specific memories or ideas from our ancestors. So if Great Aunt Martha 10 times removed was bit by a snake, it's not going to result in our fear of snakes. What he did believe is that we inherited the potentiality or predisposition to think about things in certain ways, to have certain ideas about stuff and certain reactions, certain emotions to things. So the potentiality to react is hardwired, not some specific memory. And Jung would say that over ancestral time, those of us who are the progeny of a successful line of ancestors who stayed away from poisonous snakes because they were dangerous, most likely have the potentiality to want to stay away from snakes. It's just pretty much as easy as that. I guess Jung might also call it, if he's going to do modern evolutionary psych, an adaptation. Let me kind of key you in on how to think about the idea of predispositions, and I'm going to start simple-minded and move into a more sophisticated version of predispositions. So here's one of my favorite Rodins, the thinker. I've got a couple of them around here. I've got one decorating my desk. He's right here with me, making sure I'm honest. Rodin cast bronze. So when you make a bronze casting, first you make the master, and then you set that master in some things like either clay or sand or something, and then you produce a wax version of it, at least with this type of casting. Then you take that wax form and surround it by sand, pack the sand into it. You leave a couple of little tubes coming out of the sand to pour the bronze in, and also to let the gases escape. So you've gone through all this trouble, you've made a form of a statue, so you got a master of this, probably not in metal, probably in some other substance. You make a wax copy of it, pack it in some sand, make sure you have spouts in the sand to let out the gas and in the bronze, and away you go, you pour the bronze in. And hopefully you get a rough hewn version of something that has the potential to be a great sculpture. Now, Rodin left his masters and molds to the French government, and to this day, you can buy a real, this isn't a real, copy of Rodin's sculptures from the original molds. That's kind of cool. Now the question that artists have is it really a Rodin if Rodin didn't cast it and finish it? So it's usually discussed as being after Rodin. Kind of cool. What if conditions aren't right? And you pour the bronze and something goes wrong. Maybe the sand's too dry. Maybe the sand's too wet. Maybe the wax doesn't melt right. All kinds of factors. What do you get? You get a big blob of metal. And that happens all the time with castings. They don't come out right necessarily the first time. So bronze and molten bronze has the potential to be a great work of art if everything goes right. Our next predisposition, a tree. By any other name. It's not a rose or a tree. Oh well. A tree has the potential to be a book, lumber, all kinds of things. Remember that from your third grade science class where you talked about the great benefits of trees. So a seed has the predisposition to be a tree. Great science, eh? Look at all you're learning in this class. Let's get a little bit more sophisticated. Nice 2D picture with some depth here. A psychophysical example. We have the potential to see the world in 3 dimensions, and through experience and training, we're capable of being able to discern things like depth and distance and things like that. We all know, looking at this picture here, that it's a flat 2D image, but the artist has given it a little bit of perspective, so it looks like a road meandering through the mountains someplace. Okay, you can buy that one too. Let's get a little bit more sophisticated. How about a cognitive example? Now, a lot of psychology students aren't going to buy this one because psychology students on average hate math. And Jung would say, from a cognitive example, we're born with the potential to do geometry and math of all sophisticated types. And through training and experience, we get better at solving geometric problems. Now, in my past life, I was a mechanical designer and draftsman, and designed machines to put car parts together in Detroit. So I've used lots of geometry in my time, used lots of math. Do a lot of stat. And I bet I could teach you some geometry even if you hated geometry in high school. Or college, if that's where you had it. But my feeling on this one is we have the potential to do these things. We're hardwired to be able to do these things. Some of us better than others. Some are great mathematicians, some aren't. I put myself in that latter category. But I can do it if I have to. Okay, so we've gone from simple physical stuff. Now we're mucking around with cognitive things. Let's go one step further and get Jungian. How about a psychological example? Carl Jung said we had the ability, the potential to believe in a supreme being. And through experience and training, we become capable of believing in God or gods. Fascinating notion, isn't it? And Jung would say that one of the reasons that we can believe in God is because we're kind of hardwired to. There is no evidence for the godical or God gene, as far as anyone knows, but we're predisposed, according to Jung, to want to believe in something higher and more powerful than us. Now, our ancient ancestors on the savanna plains of Africa most likely deified nature. The gods of thunder and the storm gods and the sun god and all that good stuff. And over our ancestry as humans, because our ancestors worshipped a godlike entity or gods, we can easily form the belief about God or gods. And depending on the culture you're born into, the region of the world you're born into, you may be a member of any one of a innumerable number of religious groups. You can hit the biggies. We can talk about Christians and Muslims and Jews and Hindus, Buddhists. I know I'm missing probably one that's going to make somebody upset, but we don't have time to list all the religions here. But if you're born into a family and in turn they follow the cultures or the customs of a culture, which are often religious, you are indoctrinated to these things from an early age. Now, I was born Catholic. My mom says if I walk into a church now, it might be out of spite, but I was born and raised Catholic. And I went through all of the sacraments, with the exception of the last rites. Haven't done that one yet. Some of you may think I should have. But we want to believe that there is a higher order entity out there that's going to save us, some grander thing. And so many people pray to a god or gods for solace. Well, let's take this example of higher order beings a little further. Here we have a little flying saucer. Jung wrote a book late 1950s, early 1960s about flying saucers. Was he abducted? Did he meet aliens? Did he meet E.T.? Did he meet the aliens from Independence Day? Did he meet Will Smith? No. Jung wrote about living in a technological time. And there are many people who nowadays aren't very religious, but they believe in technology, and that technology will save them. And if you look at science fiction stories, and I like science fiction, but I'm not a super fan, you find what I say are two of the basic type alien stories. You have your aliens come down to Earth like E.T. They are nice to us. They teach us some things. And they save us from our foibles as humans. The other kind of aliens, well, those are the Independence Day aliens from those movies, where the whole goal is to slaughter all of mankind and take over our planet. Not many in between. And even these evil, mean, nasty aliens that are out to destroy us do something for humanity. They pull us all together as a race, and we get rid of all of our petty biases and hatreds, and go on as a race of people to overcome the alien threat. Kind of cool. When I was a little kid, my dad loved watching the original Twilight Zone with Rod Serling. And to be honest, when I was like 5 or 6 and I would hear the dee music, I would get freaked out and scared. Those shows just scared the heck out of me. Of course, they're nothing like horror stories now, but they were pretty scary for me at the time. Now that I'm grown and somewhat mature, I love watching the old Twilight Zone shows. So let me tell you about one of my favorite episodes that kind of makes the point of Jung and the predisposition. And you can find this on streaming services all over the place. The title of the episode is to serve man. So it's an early 1950s, an early 1960s, story. Starts out with big news flash: the aliens are flying around, and flying saucers are out there. So one of them lands in New York City on the lawn of the United Nations. And after much hubbub, the alien goes to meet the General Assembly and make a speech. Now the alien's your typical alien of the early 1960s. They're the kind that are mocked in the Men in Black series. They've got the humongous forehead like B.F. Skinner, the big Wanglebird collars that I'm glad disappeared from the disco era. This particular guy glided across the floor, probably was getting pushed on roller skates, and telepathically talks to every member of the UN at the same time, and says that we have come to help you. We're part of a bigger alien organization, Confederation of Planets, blah, 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 blah. And you're starting to venture into space, and we want to bring you into this community. But you got to kind of straighten up, and with our help, you can easily do it. So the alien offers ways of protecting people to get rid of the military. So militaries become obsolete. They give the humans all kinds of chemicals and all kinds of magic substances that turn things like deserts into vastly productive farms. They have medical prowess way above ours, and they cure all the human diseases. And so they make this big offer to do this to the world, and naturally the world leaders accept. Now, on the way out of the UN building, the alien hands a book to the Secretary General of the UN. It's a really fancy book. It's jeweled, but it's an alien writing. This is where the story really starts. So the alien takes off, and because we're humans and we're suspicious and cynical about everything, the alien book is given to an American code breaker who's got the big wall of computers behind him. His assistant is an extremely attractive woman in early 1960s, dress with the high heels and hose and all that stuff. And she's obviously got a mega crush on him, but he's the nerd scientist and doesn't know she exists. So they set to work attempting to decipher the alien book. And they make a breakthrough quickly. They break the title of the book, which gives everybody in the world something to be excited about. The title of the book and the title of the episode is To Serve Man. So the guy tries to break the code, and he tries to break the code, and he's not able to do it, and he's getting frustrated. And he still doesn't notice the girl that's got the hots for him. So, in the meantime, the aliens solve all of humanity's problems. And the side effect is it's really kind of boring to be on Earth because the problems are all solved. So, to compensate for that, the aliens start offering one-way rides on their spaceships to their planet. And because it's so far away, there's no coming back, but it's supposed to be, the land of milk and honey, and it's supposed to be wonderful. So the code breaker finally gives up, says he's going to take a flying saucer ride. And as he's walking up the ramp of the spaceship, his assistant comes running to the chain link fence and grabbing it and pulling on it and yelling for him to not get on because she's finally cracked it. And she yells to him, "To serve man, to serve man," as a cookbook. So they solved our problem, but they turned us into cattle. So you get some of these double-edged alien stories that, they solve all our problems, but we become food on their plate. Catch the episode if you can, it's really cool. But back to more Jungian stuff. You probably thought you were abducted by a saucer by the time it took me to tell you that story. Well, Jung believed that humans are born with many predispositions, as he says, bequeathed to them by their ancestors. I would say inherited, but bequeathed sounds kind of cool. In turn, these dispositions guide our conduct. They determine in part what enters consciousness. And what enters consciousness for an analytical type person? Pretty important. The dispositions also respond to determine how we respond to the environment. Interesting notion. For example, we were using the snake example. You see a snake, you have a little fear emotion. You climb up high. To go up on a roof, whether you're cleaning gutters, or more typically for me, putting up Christmas decorations. Good to have a little anxiety when you're hanging up someplace really high with just a ladder between you and the ground. Good to have some fear, because fear will arouse things like being more careful. And Jung would say that we have thousands and thousands of these predispositions that in turn allow us to quickly understand the world without learning everything. For those of you who have had history of psych, especially my version, you're saying, looks a little bit like Plato and forms. And you're right. Kind of looks a little bit like that too. The old ideas kind of hang around for a long time. So, a major component of Jungian theory, as you will find, is that we're hardwired to think, act, and feel in certain systematic ways. And we'll learn more about that as we go through our discussion of Jungian psychology. See you next time. This has been a We Have Couches video production. Copyright 2020, Professor Michael Botwin. All rights reserved.